Hey everyone, Kieran here. This is going to be a very different video from everything else I've made for this channel, or really anything else I've ever made before, because this is going to be an open letter to everyone that I love regarding the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm doing this because in my search for the next Black Lives Matter event in my area, I took my first scroll through Facebook in what has to be at least 2 years. And while I was mostly very proud to see the people I've grown to know over the years from college, high school, and beyond rallying together and standing up for what we know in our hearts is right, I've also found a few instances that made me very sad and ashamed. I saw people that I know and love undervaluing the movement, and somehow even worse, not realizing how they're undervaluing the movement. People saying that it's just a fraction of a percent of bad cops that we're focusing far too much on, while simultaneously endorsing and perpetuating a system that targets and kills black and brown bodies. So I'm making this video that might as well be called White Guy Mansplains Racism to his friends and family in a desperate attempt with almost no chance of catching the eye of those who really need to see it, in hopes that maybe, just maybe, something about it will help a good-hearted person with their head in the wrong place understand what it is we are fighting for. And more than that, why this is a movement that cannot and should not be stopped if anyone, especially those in black and brown bodies, wishes to truly be free. But before I start, I just want to say that I know I'm probably not the best person to be making this video. I know that I even personally could have done more for this movement in the past. A lot of us could have. And there really is no way that I'll be able to do this justice or even cover everything in this video. And I just know that I would be a really crappy ally and advocate if I didn't at least try. So at the risk of looking like a fool or an ass or coming off as self-important or self-righteous, I make this video that will likely go unseen by those who truly need to see it. However, if you think this video might be for you, if you haven't openly and visibly been a vocal advocate for the Black Lives Matter movement, and not just on social media, but like in your daily interactions, please, I implore you to continue listening. I'm going to be covering some of the major points, especially when you hear things you might not like. Please listen harder. That's how we grow and become better allies and advocates and people. So without further ado, here's my ramblings. First, I want to make it very clear that this isn't just a moment, but a movement that has existed since the founding of our country. This is a continuation of our endless struggle to ensure everyone's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because the sad truth is, our country was founded on and continues to profit from the exploitation of minority communities, specifically those in black and brown bodies. Another sad truth is, because our capitalist system was built on this exploitation, it was also built to require it. So when America became divided during the Civil War over whether we should fight for the self-evident truth that all people are created equal, or America's highest belief that profit takes precedence over people, we of course compromised. We decided to disband slavery only in name, but not in practice. And no, I don't just mean the sharecropping that, a lot of us remember learning about in middle school. I mean, we kept slavery legal for anyone who was imprisoned. And luckily for our slavery-dependent system, we already had two key factors going for us to ensure the continual mistreatment, oppression, enslavement, and abuse of our minority communities. Factor number one: a government-organized police force that was originally founded to hunt and recapture escaped slaves. Factor number two: the ability to shape the laws of our land. And if you think that's an exaggeration, please refer to this quote from an Alabama planter from the book The New Jim Crow. "We have the power to pass stringent police laws to govern the Negroes. This is a blessing, for they must be controlled in some way, or white people cannot live among them." Now, with the bare minimum of groundwork laid, the following numbers start to make a lot more sense. In Minneapolis, police use force against black people at 7 times the rate as white people. Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. 1 in 1,000 black men in America can be expected to be killed by the police. Over 2,300 per 100,000 black Americans is currently incarcerated, compared to 450 per 100,000 white Americans. America has by far the largest incarceration rate of any country in the world, about 737 per 100,000 citizens. Now, I could go on with numbers and share with you the percent of black Americans that are incarcerated for misdemeanors or wrongful convictions, but I have larger points to make for the people this video is intended for, and I don't want this to turn into a lecture. This video, at its core, is a plea. The next major point that I have to make is on how you are likely seeing this portrayed in the media, and how that is reflected in the black history that you didn't learn about in school. Ask yourself, have you called these peaceful demonstrations riots? Or have you wrongfully linked the looting of stores to people that are peacefully exercising their First Amendment rights? These protesters are not thugs. They are not rioters. They are peaceful American citizens who have been attacked by a force that sees them as a threat to the current dominant socioeconomic ethnic group in America. These people have not brought weapons. They have not incited violence, and yet military-level force has been brought down upon them. Now, if I'm losing you at this point, if this doesn't sound right to you and it's not matching what you're seeing in the news, I need you to remember 2 key things. Number 1, every news source has an agenda. And number 2, fear is good for ratings. If you are afraid, you keep watching. And so it makes sense that they're going to paint these peaceful demonstrations as violent riots. Furthermore, I want you to compare these demonstrations to demonstrations where the vocal group was mostly white. For instance, Charlottesville. When proud white supremacists and white nationalists lit up tiki torches holding Nazi and Confederate flags while wearing their MAGA hats, shouting things like "the Jew will not replace us," "white lives matter," "death to Antifa," which is essentially saying death to the anti-fascist movement, and white power. These people were actively threatening violence, some of them openly carrying weapons and shouting the Nazi slogan "blood and soil." And yet, no tear gas was thrown. These riots were not broken up. And as opposed to being called thugs, our president called them fine people. And this is not an isolated incident. Alt-righters, white supremacists, and neo-Nazis have gone so far as to storm government buildings, and yet, not only does the media refuse to portray them as the threat they truly are, but our government has gone so far as to protect them. Why are they protected while the Black Lives Matter movement is attacked? I would be disappointed if I had to explain that this deep into the video. If at this point you're saying anything along the lines of, these are isolated incidents, or all lives matter, or it doesn't apply to me because I'm not a racist, let me quickly address each of those comments before I move on to my final remarks. First, these are not isolated incidents. These are not flaws in the system, and no, the system isn't broken either. The system is working exactly as it was designed to, and that is the problem. The only flaw that has arisen in the system is that the facade has dropped. Now, the facade was gone for many years for those who were paying attention, and it never existed to those who were being targeted by it. However, many people who still believed in the facade saw its true purpose during the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that it took to murder George Floyd. Now, for some people, the facade is too comforting to leave. To that, I say too bad. People are being murdered by that facade. Second, yeah, no duh, all lives matter. But that's not the point. The point is our system does not currently value Black lives, and that is a serious problem. And nobody in the Black Lives Matter community is saying that only Black lives matter. And even the attempt to turn Black lives matter into all lives matter is another way that people are erasing the Black community. And thirdly, even if you aren't a racist, turning a blind eye to racism, or endorsing a system that allows racism to prosper is just as bad as being one. Evil wins by good people doing nothing, and nobody is truly free until everyone is. Now, on to my final point, referring back to how Black communities have not only been targeted by violence, but erased from history. Now, this final point may seem to some of you unrelated, but I guarantee you it is not. My final point opens with a question. Have you ever heard of the Tulsa massacre? For many of you out there, the answer is probably no. But thankfully, due to the fact that the media is finally paying attention to it, for many of you, the answer may also be yes. For those of you who have not heard about it, let me give you a brief history lesson. In 1921, there was a black community in Tulsa who found a very prosperous situation. Their economic growth, when finally away from their oppressors, reached a height so high that they became known as the Black Wall Street. On May 31st and June 1st of 1921, for 2 straight days, an entire white community massacred the town, using not only guns and incendiary devices, but also planes and bombs. Not only were thousands injured and hospitalized and hundreds killed, but 10,000 black residents were left homeless, and the current day equivalent of $32.25 million in personal property was destroyed. No compensation was ever made to a single member of the community or the town itself, and it took more than 75 years for even an investigation to be made into these events. And in the end, all they got was a park in their honor. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these events are now finally coming up in the news, and there is some progress being made towards reparations. But think about the fact that it took until 2020 for even these events to be added to a high school's curriculum in Oklahoma. If you fail to see the relevance or importance of this, I ask you to imagine if the same events had happened but on White Wall Street. Same year of 1921, same amount of deaths, same amount of property damage done, but to a white community. Do you not think that the events would have played out differently? Black Lives Matter is a movement that must be supported by each and every kind-hearted American, which you all are. Anything but immense, visible, vocal, clear, and constant support of this movement is at its core the same as turning a blind eye to every past, present, and future victim of racial injustice in its many forms. Not only that, but it is saying that all of those who have been brutally and unjustly murdered by the police should be forgotten, and that their deaths should mean nothing. George Floyd, who cried out for his mother as a police officer knelt on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Breonna Taylor, an EMT who was shot in her own home while the cops burst in without identifying themselves and opening fire. Botham Jean, who was shot in his own home by an off-duty officer who accidentally went into his home instead of her own. Trayvon Martin, a young kid who was murdered by a wannabe police officer, George Zimmerman. Tamir Rice, a 12-year-old kid who was shot and murdered by a cop while holding a toy gun. Eric Gardner, who was choked to death for the crime of selling cigarettes on the street. Michael Brown, unarmed, shot 6 times after being accused of stealing cigarettes. Walter Scott, shot in the back 5 times after being pulled over for a broken taillight. Philando Castile, shot during a routine check while attempting to show paperwork for his registered firearm. There are so many more, and there will continue to be more if we do not stand up for what is right. And if you find yourself thinking anything along the lines of, well, he had a gun, or, well, he shouldn't have run, I ask you 2 things. Number 1, would you still be thinking those things if they were white? If a law-abiding, registered gun-owning white citizen was asked to show paperwork and was complying, but was then shot, would you still be thinking that? And number 2, on the matter of running or being afraid of the police. If you were a black man, and you knew that 1 in 1,000 black men in America can expect to be killed by police, wouldn't you be afraid too? If you knew every routine inspection, regardless of guilt or innocence, complying or resistance, could end in your death, might you be afraid too? If you knew that black people were being murdered in their own homes, or choked to death despite the fact that they are complying, can you really blame them for running? This video message might have been long and slightly scattered, but attempting to cover hundreds of years of atrocities against a community that I am personally not a part of is nearly impossible. My only hope is that someone actually bothered to listen, and that someone learned something, and that maybe that someone will teach their loved ones about the Tulsa massacre, or how Breonna Taylor was murdered in the dead of night in her own home. And I hope against hope that someone who might have once said, all lives matter, or it's just one bad cop, might realize the damage they are doing to a movement that is there to save lives and make all of us more free. I love you all. Please stand with us. Turning a blind eye to our country's dark underbelly does not make it go away. It allows it to fester and grow. Educate yourselves and others. It is an endless task, and being an ally and advocate is often thankless. But it's the right thing to do. Yours truly, Kieran. P.S. If I didn't reach you, I'm sorry I failed you. However, for those of you who might actually want to learn more about all of this, I've put some links in the description of this video to some videos that I thought were really incredible and helped educate me on this movement. I also encourage those of you who are watching this video who have already joined the Black Lives Matter movement to please comment with a bunch of links to other things that are helpful. Resources, videos, websites, places people can donate or find events in their area. Please reserve the comment section for just that. Just use this as a way to spread more messages. I beg everyone to please follow these links that people are posting. Please listen, please learn, please stand with us. There are people in this country who we have wronged, and they can't breathe. Thank you.